The most important piece of evidence in one of the deadliest food crimes in American history was not a document or a hard drive or a weapon. It was a 5-pound tub of peanut butter, already opened, sitting in the kitchen of a nursing home in Minnesota. In January of 2009, a state laboratory scientist worked a swab across its surface and set the sample aside to grow. Somewhere in that tub was a killer that had been loose in the American food supply for months, invisible, unclaimed, and by that week already tied to hundreds of the sick and several of the dead. The colonies that bloomed in that dish would match, marker for marker, the pattern investigators had been chasing across 46 states, and the trail that began in that open tub would run more than 1,000 miles south to a small town in Georgia peanut country, to a plant with a leaking roof, to the man who owned it, and to a 3-word email that turned a tragedy into a crime. To understand what that swab was really looking for, go back to the fall of 2008, to Brainerd, Minnesota. Shirley Almer was 72 years old and had spent the last years of her life refusing to die. She had beaten lung cancer. She had beaten a brain tumor. By December, she was in a nursing home only to get her strength back, and her family had the date circled on the calendar. She was coming home for Christmas. The kitchen there served her something soft and familiar, toast with peanut butter. On the 21st of December, 4 days short of Christmas, Shirley died of a salmonella infection her family could not explain. Weeks apart, a 78-year-old Korean War veteran named Clifford Toussignon, a soldier who had earned 3 Purple Hearts, died the same way, in the same state. He had loved peanut butter sandwiches. And out in Oregon, a police officer named Peter Hurley watched his 3-year-old son Jacob stay sick for nearly 2 weeks on the peanut butter crackers the boy begged for by name. Families buried grandmothers and soldiers and sat up nights with their toddlers, and none of them knew the others existed. The only witness connecting them was too small to see. The counting had already started. In public health laboratories across the country, every confirmed salmonella case gives up its DNA, and the pattern goes into a national database that works like a fingerprint file for outbreaks. Through November and December, the same rare pattern kept surfacing. First dozens of matches, then hundreds, spread across 46 states, and many of the sick were children. The food histories pointed everywhere and nowhere. Cafeteria meals, school lunches, snack crackers. Then the Minnesota disease detectives, investigators who had cracked national outbreaks before, pulled that open tub from a nursing home kitchen, the same institutional brand that had been served to Shirley Almer, and grew the killer straight out of it. The label said King Nut. King Nut never appeared on grocery shelves. It was sold by the tub to cafeterias, hospitals, schools, and nursing homes. And every ounce of it came from one place, a peanut plant in Blakely, Georgia, population 5,000, owned by a company most Americans had never heard of, the Peanut Corporation of America. When federal inspectors walked into the Blakely plant that January, they wrote down what they found. Mold on the ceilings, mold on the walls, a roof that let the Georgia rain fall into the production area, gaps in the doors wide enough for rodents, and dead cockroaches where food was made. A roaster that had never been proven able to kill the very bacteria it was trusted to kill. This was the machinery beneath one of the quietest supply chains in America, because the plant's real business was not the tubs. It was peanut paste, sold in bulk to other companies, folded invisibly into their brands. Crackers, cookies, ice cream, energy bars, even dog treats. When the recalls began, they did not stop for months. Nearly 4,000 different products from 361 companies pulled back in one of the largest food recalls in American history. Parents stood in their own kitchens, reading the labels on crackers they had already fed their children. School districts opened their pantries and started checking. For one long winter, the most ordinary food in the country, the sandwich spread of every American childhood, was a question mark. Then investigators got into the company's email, and a contamination story became a crime story. The plant had a habit. When a batch tested positive for salmonella, the product could ship anyway, or the sample went to another laboratory and another, until somebody produced a negative. A dozen times over 2 years, tests had come back positive, and the peanuts moved. Lots left the loading dock carrying certificates of purity for tests that had never been run at all. And at the top of the paper trail sat the owner himself, Stuart Parnell, pressing to keep product moving, complaining and writing about the money that testing was costing him. When results were delayed on a lot he wanted gone, his answer to the plant came back in 3 words: just ship it. When a lot that had tested positive was retested clean, he wrote, "Okay, let's turn them loose then." The families in Minnesota and Oregon had believed they were victims of bad luck, of nature, of accident. The inbox said otherwise. Someone had done the arithmetic on their lives, and the arithmetic had come out in favor of shipping on schedule. On the 11th of February 2009, the two ends of that supply chain met in a hearing room in Washington. Jeff Almer, Shirley's son, sat at the witness table and told Congress that his mother had beaten cancer twice and could not survive peanut butter. Peter Hurley, the Portland police officer, brought the same brand of crackers that had poisoned his son. "This was not an accident," he said. Then the committee called Stuart Parnell. A congressman lifted a jar of his company's products, sealed shut in red crime scene tape, and asked whether he would be willing to open it and eat what was inside. Parnell leaned toward the microphone. "Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, on advice of my counsel, I respectfully decline to answer your questions based on the protections afforded me under the United States Constitution." Another question. The same sentence. Another. The same sentence, word for word, until the committee sent him away. 2 days after the hearing, the Peanut Corporation of America filed for bankruptcy and dissolved. The company was dead. The question that stayed behind was whether any person would ever answer for what it had shipped. Justice moved at the speed of paperwork. 4 years passed before a federal grand jury handed down charges, and more than 5 before the case reached a courtroom in Albany, Georgia, deep in the same peanut country the company had come from. Prosecutors could not charge anyone with the deaths. The food safety laws had no such charge to offer. What they had was the paper, the shipped lots, the invented certificates, the emails. And in September of 2014, a jury found Stuart Parnell guilty on 67 federal felony counts. His brother Michael, the broker who had sold the paste onward, was convicted beside him. So was the plant's quality manager for obstruction. A year later came the sentencing, and the families finally spoke, where the Parnells had to listen. Jeff Almer had carried his mother's story for almost 7 years, to hearings, to cameras, to anyone who would hold still. And now he carried it to the man himself. Stuart Parnell stood and told the families he was truly, truly sorry. Then the judge gave him 28 years in federal prison, the harshest sentence ever handed to an executive in an American food safety case. Parnell was 61 years old. In every way that mattered, it was a life sentence for peanut butter. The case rewired the law itself. The outbreak and the hearings helped push the Food Safety Modernization Act through Congress. Signed in January of 2011, the biggest overhaul of American food safety law since 1938. For the first time, the government could order a recall itself instead of asking a company politely. Plants were required to hunt for their own hazards before the hazards found the public. And the traceback machinery, the fingerprint database, the disease detectives, the swabs in nursing home kitchens got faster and busier. None of that is abstract. It is the reason a contaminated ingredient today gets named in weeks instead of seasons. It is the reason a certificate of purity is a document an executive can go to prison for faking. The machine that catches poisoned food in America was not designed in a calm moment by careful planners. It was built out of funerals and out of the stubbornness of the people who came home from them. Stuart Parnell remains in federal prison. His appeals ran out years ago. He is scheduled to be an old man before he is free. Shirley Almer's family still measures the years in Christmases. She died 4 days before the one she was coming home for. Jacob Hurley grew up, and the tub from that Minnesota kitchen finished its work. It is the reason there is a case number, a sentence, and a law where there used to be only a mystery and a shrug. 9 people were gone because shipping on schedule cost less than throwing a batch away. 28 years followed because a son refused to let anyone forget that arithmetic. In the summer of 2026, when a stomach parasite tore through American food in numbers never seen before, the tracers ran it to its source while the outbreak was still burning. But the postmortem writes itself. The only question is whether anyone reads it before the next one.